This week's Spotlight explores the extremely unique Age of the Primes Liege Maximo figure, including a number of tips and tricks for displays and transformation. Plus, I'll make a case on why you might want to consider including him in your collection. All this and more, only at Heroic Nonsense. Let's go. We're back with another spotlight on one of the 13 primes, this time looking at the most evil and manipulative of the bunch, Age of the Primes Liege Maximo. Look, I get it. This prime is probably one of the most divisive ones in terms of design and might not be for everyone. I mean, I even felt that way before ordering him. I really only planned on getting him to complete our 13 primes collection. Having now had some time to play around with the figure, I'm a lot more impressed with it, even begrudgingly accepting the strangeness of his alien-looking spaceship alt mode. Regardless of how one might feel about his bot mode though, it is quite impressive, especially in hand and completely assembled. I'm going to take you through the entire spectrum of display and build ideas for him with some really great suggestions on how to display him and fit him into your collection. So with that, let's check out what this guy is all about. As a figure and character, Liege Maximo is definitely not your typical Transformer. He just looks so different and doesn't feel at all connected to the original 80s cartoon. And that makes sense since much of his backstory does come from the comics, with this design inspiration specifically coming right out of Marvel's Transformers Generation 2 comic book from the 90s. I'm sure I have that comic somewhere back home, but unfortunately didn't even think of checking and pulling it before putting together this review. Regardless, it's fairly easy to see how different he looks from the 80s style Transformers we're used to. More than that, this iteration of Liege Maximo almost looks like a mini Unicron, from the rounded legs to the huge horns emanating from his back. Whatever version of Liege Maximo you are familiar with or prefer, I think we can all agree that this is definitely a standout release from the Age of the Primes line. Let's take a deeper dive now into all his incredible design elements and all the ways you can customize your figure for your own collection. There really is so much to see on this figure, from the huge horns on his back and smaller ones incorporated into his completely unique crown of sorts, to the techno-organic design elements, including the incorporation of wires and cables and jetting armor, which gives him an almost Bay Universe feel to him. Even his head sculpt is packed with detail: horns, tentacles, cables, spikes, and a menacing face and helm that borrow design ideas from pretty much all other Transformers lines. What's amazing is that his back is almost as complex as his front. It's obvious the designers didn't skimp on paint, molding, or features for this figure. Look at the markings on the horns themselves. I mean, that's really some intricate detailing they went for. There's no doubt about it, this figure and character looks imposing. While I originally might have preferred more recent designs like the ones from the IDW run that I feel play into his more manipulator type personality, I am quite impressed with this version in toy form and have really grown to appreciate it. But the fun doesn't stop there, because there are multiple ways you can configure this figure, starting here with a bit of manipulation of his horns. While only a minor change, it does give Liege Maximo a bit of a different appearance, slightly less in your face. You can even remove the horns on his back entirely to give him a bit of a sleeker look, perhaps more in line with his original appearance in the 90s comic. Still imposing, but giving off less of a Unicron descendant type of vibe. While the shoulder armor can also come off, I wouldn't recommend it. I'd say that goes a bit too far in my opinion. As for his weapon, he comes with a launcher of sorts, which includes 3 red translucent Legion darts, which essentially represent Liege Maximo's artifact. Apparently, they contain various toxins used to take down his enemies. The launcher is an interesting design, though I would have perhaps expected something a bit bigger. I guess in the end, it does make sense given its role as a dart launcher, and as we'll see, transforms in a way to incorporate it into his alt mode. It doesn't end there though, because the launcher can in fact slot into a port on his left arm, which gives it a more techno-organic look. The port is basically a small red translucent connector that is attached to the other side of his left hand. You can see it here tucked away in his forearm, which can then rotate 180 degrees to reveal the port. On its own, it really doesn't look that great, but it can double as an extra laser, I guess. It just looks a bit strange here, especially with how the arm design slopes down. The darts can individually fit into it as well, which gives it a bit more usefulness, especially in play situations. In the end though, attaching the launcher to the port is definitely the better looking option. However, there is still one more weapon we haven't looked at yet, and it's a big one. That's right, the horns and thruster unit can actually detach from his back and become its own brutal double-barreled weapon. And it addresses my earlier thought of why Liege Maximo had such a small weapon for such a bigger-than-life character. And I have to say, I really like this option since there are a lot of ways you can use this assembly as a weapon, including by adding in some darts to the thruster ports. Taking it a step further, the original launcher can also attach to it, creating a sort of super weapon, though I think I prefer them separate. Of course, you can always grab any of your blast effects, which will easily slot into the ports in this weapon, creating a much more dynamic look to this display shot. I preferred using these two, but as we'll see in a bit, all versions of the recent effects can be used. How about using his horn jetpack as a shield? That's possible too, and I think looks fantastic. Really works from the Roman Legion kind of perspective too. The tabs slot right into his hand in this position to give him the ability to wield this huge accessory as a shield. It's just amazing how versatile this figure is, and I love that you can play around with it to create so many different looks. You can even take that shield design and create your own unique look by rotating the horns in any configuration you can think of, unique to your own style and preference. If you're one of those collectors that likes to have the ability to store the character's weapons away when not in use, I got you covered there as well. Because there are multiple ways you can do that, all hiding the launcher away in customizable and realistic ways. Including this way, which is one of my favorites, since it actually looks quite cool from the front view. As for posability, to be honest, wasn't the easiest to balance him in this pose given his size and how heavy the figure is. The feet work great for general balance, but takes a bit of work to get into the right positioning for walking. From the side, you'll want to push down the back portion of his foot like I've done here so it doesn't stick out too much given its length. Once you do get him into this pose, I have to say, he does look amazing and quite menacing. It's easy to get him into a crouching pose, his leg guards do rotate up so there's plenty of room to bend and manipulate his legs. I personally wouldn't keep him in this pose, I just don't see him as a character crouching down this way, but it is something you can do. While most bots aren't able to fold their arms over their chest, Liege Maximo can, and you know what? It doesn't look half bad. In case you were wondering about whether Starscream's throne works with Liege Maximo, I'm happy to say that it does. The designers definitely thought this one through because he really does look great sitting on the throne. I did notice that it was hard to get him right flush against the seat of the throne though, leaving a bit of space noticeable from certain angles. But it didn't take too much to find the right configuration, allowing him to basically sit perfectly down, simply with a bit of movement of his legs into this wider positioning. Another bonus, his hands can drape over the edges of the armrest, made possible in part by the ability to move his thumbs separately from the rest of the fingers. And I bet you didn't notice this, but the jetpack with horns can actually tab right into the back of Starscream's throne so that the figure can actually sit properly on the throne, while also keeping the aesthetic of the horns emanating from his back. What a display piece this is, and actually allows you to perfectly replicate the iconic last panel from the G2 comic of him sitting on his throne. Overall, I am really liking this figure in the end, and while he may not be styled in my preferred look for my Transformers, that being the 80s style, he does look and feel incredible and fits nicely into the wide range of designs created for the 13 Primes from the Age of the Primes line. Coming out of this review, what do you guys think? Was anyone on the fence and now considering getting him? Let us know in the comments section. Now, this is where things get a bit weird. What you're looking at here is his alt mode, which is supposed to be a spaceship. And while it does definitely give off spaceflight vibes, it's definitely not a typical design, leaning more into a bug-like motif, which I'm not the hottest on. Taking that aside, however, the design is unique and creative and executed really well. Within the context of this design, I think they knocked it out of the park. Everything comes together nicely, it stands out, it's big, and as we'll see in the step-by-step transformation section, it's engineered really well. So there's lots of detail on this thing too, and as weird as it may be, for what it is, it looks kinda cool. Again, this is not my preference at all, but if I were into these types of Bayverse and bug-like designs, I'd be all over this one. The horns are definitely the standout aesthetic on this design though. Out of all shots and angles, this is my favorite. I get very Quintesson vibes as well from this mode, which kinda works too. The back is surprisingly sleek and clean, which is very impressive. I'm still amazed at how well those horns have been integrated into this figure. The underneath is also pretty well designed. While you can see a lot more of the robot elements here, they tuck away nicely and are molded in such a way that it works within the overall design of the ship. This view probably gives me the most insectoid type feel though, but at least the carapace type design locks together nicely to give it an overall smooth appearance. If you want to take it to the extreme though, you can fold back the leg armor and leave the top exposed, much more disturbing to look at. What you're left with is the most bug looking version of this design if you're into that type of thing. Really interested in knowing though, is there anyone who truly loves this design, and if so, why? I'm sure there are some people who dig this type of look out there, so make your voices heard below. Now onto the comparison section, which won't be as long as usual since Liege Maximo is really his own thing. Plus, I'll have a lot more to show of him as part of the display and build section. But for now, let's do a high level scale comparison through some of the different primes from the Age of the Primes line. And right now, it looks like he's the biggest out of the bunch. And by the way, I'm not including Star Optimus in this list. I did throw in Studio Series 86 Megatron here though, just to see how he scales with that line. And Maximo actually looks quite good, and bigger, which is nice to see. Everything else scales quite nicely with the bots I've chosen, representing a good cross sample of the different heights in the line. Megatronus is probably my favorite pairing out of the Primes though, something about them both being on the wrong side of good and their overall look works well together. As for vehicles, I chose the Primes that seem to work the best aesthetically, most of them being flyers, and they all look quite good with him, again including Megatronus, with whom I'm always amazed because of how big they made him in his tank mode. For a full look at how the various other Primes look and scale in alt modes across the whole spectrum of Primes, check out my 13 Primes Age of the Primes playlist, which showcases them in a lot more detail. One fun comparison I thought I'd throw in, Liege Maximo from the Power of the Primes line, which to this day I still love. The whole concept of Prime essences in Pretender bodies in this scale was just so awesome. Alright, on to the transformation, and I've got a lot of tips and tricks on this one, so make sure you stick around for the whole thing. So first things first, let's take off his weapon. And let's also take off his shoulder pads because they tend to fall off during the transformation and they can be placed back on at the end very easily. I also suggest taking off this back. You don't have to, but it can fall off, and why not just take it off now? So what we're going to start with is the head. You see we pull it forward a bit and then we push back this kind of crown portion. The head folds right in, snap that piece back, and then lift up the horns right now, because what we'll do is push the whole thing down and then just push the arms out a bit to loosen the upper body so that we can now open it. And the easiest way to do it is to pull it from the arms. And you can see here that little spike fits right into the chest. So make sure you do exactly in that order. So now we're going to push the arms in. You can see these kind of gauntlets that have to face upwards. So that's a good key. And then you see that little piece, that tab has to fit in. Otherwise, towards the end, you'll have a lot of problems finishing up the transformation. So we'll do it here as well. You can see we just have to click that tab in after the arm is rotated. And then once everything's lined up, you get this look. What we'll do now is pull open this part. You got to use a little bit of strength, but don't worry, it might be tight, but it's fine. And then we'll rotate the whole body 180 degrees. And this is when you have to put this piece back on, otherwise you won't be able to do it later in the transformation. Probably better to kind of leave the legs actually rotated first so you can fit it in, and there you go. Then just lift that part up a bit, and let's just rotate the legs back now. We're pretty much halfway there at this point. We'll move to the legs and we'll fold up the feet. So top and bottom fold in like this. And now what you have to do here, which I was a little bit worried about because I thought I was going to break it, but it's on a tab. You just got to pull these side pieces off. So you just pull back. You can see that little tab there. And then just tab the legs together after opening up these two pieces on the waist. You can see right there. You just have to make sure it's tabbed in. I recommend doing it now because now what we'll do is lift up the whole bottom portion, bring it around all the way to the front. It's a little tight, so don't worry. You see right here, it's going to fit into that slot. So there's like a little tab once the legs are together. Another reason why you want to do this at the same time, and then just push it all together like that. You got to hear the click. Now rotate the side panels 180 degrees and up. So you can see, just bring it around, get them into this position. Make sure everything's still in place, and we'll grab the weapon. You just fold it in like that, and then we're going to tab it in underneath the body of the ship. So you see there's some tabs right here, and they're going to tab into the bottom of the feet the red translucent parts. Just gotta push them in. Again, why it's important to have everything lined up, otherwise this won't fit in. And then, pretty much there, all we have to do is fold in these pieces, move the horns out of the way so they don't get caught underneath. Push it in. You can see there's a little space for the top of the weapon right there. Should fit together really snugly. And just bring these kind of weird looking pieces down. Bring the horns down as well. Actually, no, let's put the shoulder pads back in right now. And then you can bring down the horns. And that's it. He's transformed and ready to take flight. Alright, let's get into some displays and build ideas, of which I have a fairly good amount. How could we not start with a pantheon of primes, minus Vector Prime, who I didn't get because I was really not impressed with the figure, though I may eventually try to find one or wait for a new release. In this display, I'm actually using Vector Sigma as a centerpiece, which came with the A Heroes Born 2-pack. I love this setup, and the idea of these primes being presented as statues in a chamber somewhere on Cybertron. This is currently the way we have the primes displayed, though I'm now too tight on space. Which means I'll have to get a bit more creative. But if you have the space, wow does this look great, especially if you have a reflective surface like the one I'm using here. And I had to include this one, which I caught one morning having left the display out from the photo shoot the night before. Look at how the rising sunbeams play off of these figures. It was just too perfect not to grab a shot of. I have a bunch more using the Pantheon coming up towards the end, but let's first look at some other ideas I had coming out of various storylines involving Liege Maximo. This one playing off of the idea that Liege Maximo gave rise to the Decepticons, and what better way to showcase that than with the most recent Studio Series 86 versions of the Decepticons, giving me an excuse to showcase these guys, which I absolutely love. This being my favorite shot with the silhouette of Liege Maximo behind Megatron, as if the essence of Liege Maximo has been imbued into Megatron, definitely my favorite shot of the bunch. I also really like this one of Megatron standing next to Liege Maximo as he sits on the Decepticon throne. The throne Megatron knows should really be his. While on this theme of comic-inspired display ideas, this is a quick fun one of Liege Maximo and Onyx Prime, but what makes this one so special? Well, it's taken from the IDW comic run where Shockwave forms an alliance with Liege Maximo under the guise of Onyx Prime to raise a permanent Decepticon army on Cybertron by playing with time and Cybertron's history. This last one represents a storyline where Liege Maximo joined up with Micronus Prime, Alpha Trion, and Quintus Prime, forming a band of strategists with the goal of defeating Unicron. One more scene to add to the collection. As I was exploring the figure, I noticed a ton of ports in places I didn't really expect any. In the end, they're quite useful for his alt mode since they can all be used to create this look of him taking off and landing or flying. Each shoulder armor piece has 2 ports that can be used to attach blast effects. In this case, I opted for different ones for each of the front and back ports. Looks great from any angle and definitely adds to the coolness of this alt mode. It really makes the ship look a lot better in my opinion. You can also add some blast effects to the thruster portion, which looks absolutely amazing in this case. It's really up to you which blast effects, color, and combinations you want to use. There's no wrong way to do it. You can even add some to the side paneling as side thrusters. I imagine him using this as part of his docking or landing maneuvering. Now I left this one as a surprise for you guys because it's completely based off of my own imagination. I already had these guys grouped together as a sort of loose ragtag group of Decepticon specialists, mostly because of how they all look together. Throwing Liege Maximo into the mix totally completes the look as their leader and also gives this group a great backstory. The Deluxe Insecticons also 100% work from a lore perspective based off of some comic book storylines where Liege Maximo led some beast-type bots. By way of a quick roll call, we have all 4 Deluxe Insecticons as well as Legacy Evolution Skyquake and Detritus and Star Raiders Cannonball. By adding in Onyx Prime, you not only get a great looking group of Decepticons with some primes, but also a set that plays off of the Shockwave Onyx Prime IDW storyline with your group of Liege Maximo loyalists. Bringing it back full circle, I've recreated my pantheon of primes again, this time incorporating different groups of Transformers visiting these hallowed halls. Starting with the best, Megatron from the Studio Series 86 line coming to take the key to Vector Sigma for himself, which is housed in the same halls. Another fun one is with the IDW line, this time using Senator Shockwave and Ratbat visiting the Pantheon to try and unravel the secrets of the Primes. I actually really love these versions of the IDW Transformers and can't wait for the next lineup that was recently announced. I actually think this lineup of IDW bots works best in this kind of storyline based display idea. What do you guys think? Are the IDW Transformers hits or misses for you? Share your thoughts in the comment section. One more from that lineup, Nova Prime, another great figure and character from that run that fits in perfectly with this lineup of Primes, coming to steal the secrets of the Primes, similar to Megatron's visit. And finally, Minor Megatron and Orion Pax visiting the Pantheon, each with their own motives and before they became the iconic leaders of their respective factions. I borrowed this idea from some of my previous reviews of the 13 Primes, where I used some models we have of D16 and Orion Pax from the Transformers 1 continuity. This idea works equally well with these more traditional looking versions of the two leaders. You could almost see the blind optimism of Pax and the hidden motives of Megatron permeating through this image. And finally, just a fun one of some of the 13 Primes I feel look best together with Liege Maximo in their alt modes. To see all the Primes together, check out my previous reviews of some of the other Primes in the playlist. So in the end, while not a traditional looking Transformer by any means, this version of Liege Maximo has so much potential, both within the context of individual displays as well as group ones. Now that you've seen all my tips and ideas, what's your final judgment? As we wrap up this spotlight on Liege Maximo, let's take a quick look at the box art, which in this case looks incredible. I really like this more traditional styled comic book looking image of Maximo. A fantastic close-up on the side panel of Liege Maximo where you can really get a better look at the details. The back art has a nice shot of both modes of Liege Maximo and the info regarding his darts in Cybertronian. I like this bit of detective work they include on the packaging. And finally, an image of Liege Maximo that was obviously created before the final design of the toy was locked in. I like the version we got much better than the one of this side panel, way too insectoid looking. So that's it for this week's spotlight of Liege Maximo. Really hope you enjoyed this one and gained some appreciation for this very outwardly but impressive looking Prime. For me, it definitely opened up my eyes while I put this spotlight together as to how interesting a figure this actually is. Will definitely look great in our collection. If you enjoy these types of in-depth Transformer spotlights going beyond a typical review, then please consider subscribing so that we can keep growing this awesome community. And for all you Heroic Nonsense subscribers, a heartfelt thank you for helping us reach 1,000 subscribers. You're what keeps this channel going. Thanks for watching, and remember, it's all such heroic nonsense in the end.
Transform!